I had a major brain fart, you guys. I thought I had already done a review for season 1 of Reacher. No, what I had done was just a review for the first 2 episodes, but I finished this show quite some time ago. I took notes and just thought I'd done the recording, and no, I hadn't. So, the downside to that is the fact that there's been some time between finishing this series and the recording of this review, so things aren't super fresh. I do have the notes, like I said, but I don't have the instinctive just sort of bubbling over the top, just wanting to talk and talk and talk. So this might be one of my shorter reviews. I don't know. We'll see. Actually, for the most part, I think that the sentiments that I feel about the entire first season are pretty much the same as how I felt when I saw the first 2 episodes about a week or so before the show came out, or a few days before the show. I can't remember. I saw an advanced screening. Anyway, I really enjoyed it. I made comments about how I felt like the actor Alan Ritchson was a great choice for the role of Reacher. He fits that huge, just massive, hulking physique of the character because Reacher is a big guy. And also, I like the little town that this is set in. I like the characters that are here. And I'm pretty sure I mentioned this guy here. The actor's name is, I had to write it down because I didn't know what his name was, Malcolm Goodwin. I don't think I'd ever seen him before, but I really liked his performance in here. He was one of my favorite characters, actually, and I'm pretty sure that I indicated in my other review that I liked the chemistry between the character of Reacher and the character of Finlay, who's played by Malcolm Good. I liked the chemistry between all of them. The girl who plays Roscoe there, she was really good. But in particular, I really liked the dynamic between Reacher and Finlay. They constantly butted heads. They were at odds with each other. They kept the verbal sparring between them was really fun. I mean, and as the series went on, it got funnier and funnier because you could tell that they were growing to like and respect each other, and yet they would still have these, it was just, I really thought that was well done, and that's something I'm going to miss when the second season comes around, because when the second season happens, it's not going to involve these same characters. Reacher will have moved on to someplace else because that's the way the books are. From what I understand, I've only read one book. That was the first one. It's been so many years since I read it that I really didn't remember much of anything about the plot. I didn't remember the characters specifically. I just remembered Reacher. He was a big, huge guy. He was in this town, and his brother had gotten killed, and he was investigating the death of his brother. And it involved all sorts of things that he was finding out, but I didn't remember the details of that. I didn't even remember who had killed his brother. So watching this story, or watching this season, was like watching the story, not really knowing much of anything about it, except Reacher's a big guy and his brother got killed. So I'm glad that there'd been a bit of time between having listened to the book and having watched this. I really enjoyed the setting. I just liked that homey, sort of down south, small town feel. I liked how the characters knew each other very well, and the sense of community that you could pick up on with regard to the different, there's Lee Child there, he had a cameo. I wanted to include that picture. I love this little town. It's so cute. It reminds me a lot of the town that my grandparents lived in up in Indiana when they lived up there. And I really love that little town. It was just a tiny little, I don't even think, maybe it had one stop sign. Last time I went, maybe there was more than one, but it reminded me of that, and I always had fond memories of that little small town feel, or the small town environment, and that brought back those warm fuzzies. And so that's part of the reason why I really enjoyed almost every moment that we that we were exposed to the environment where this story took place. The dialogue, not just involving Finlay and Reacher and Roscoe, but just the interaction between all of the different characters, and the dialogue I felt was really well done, was efficient. I felt like the storytelling was pretty efficient. There were some bumps along the road, like as is typical with almost anything. For example, there were, I think I even specifically mentioned the fight scenes. One of the fight scenes, the very first one that we saw, was just insane. It was so crazy. It was just brutal, and it looked really vicious, and it looked very realistic. And then there was another fight scene that happened, and you could see elements of the choreography. Like, you could tell it was choreographed. The first one, no, it just looked like a brutal street thug fight happened in a jail, in a bathroom. But the other one, it was like, okay, you could see a person's ducking a little bit before, or a person's aiming high when they go to punch. And so you can notice when these things happen. But that wasn't the only time that happened. It occurred during other fight scenes. It was apparent. It wasn't horrible, but it was just something that when you've seen enough of them, you recognize it when you see it, and it kind of, for a moment, takes you out of it, or, kind of just jerks you out of the moment. But it wasn't enough to really mess up anything for me. But what I was getting ready to say, the reason I brought this up, is because I watched he was on, is the guy's name Rosenbaum? Oh, I'm terrible with names. The dude who played in Smallville as Lex Luthor, he has this cool podcast, and he has really interesting guests on. I like to watch clips of it sometimes. I ended up listening to the entire episode with him on it, and he was talking about when they were working on this season. He said it was really down to the wire. The shooting conditions were terrible. He got very, very sick at some point, and he was hurting himself all the time. They didn't have a lot of time to rehearse the fight scenes. And he said in between takes, he'd be like reading through it and trying to practice, and rehearse as best he could. I don't know why the heck I'm wearing this. I feel like I'm yelling. I don't need to be wearing this. Wow. So sorry if my voice was raised really high. But what I was saying is, because of the limitations that they had in filming, that may have had something to do with those things that I noticed about the fight choreography, the fight scenes. Maybe the second season, it won't be quite as apparent. He did say that they told him that insane, hectic shooting schedule was only for that first season, because the first season was the most important. And so the second season and any subsequent seasons that happen shouldn't be that, tightly wound as far as needing to get stuff done. So maybe there will be improvements as far as that goes. But it's really a minor quibble. Something else that I noticed that stuck out to me to the point that I made a note is there's a character in there that shows up a few episodes in. And it's like it's an old army buddy of Reacher's. I can't even remember her name. Well, she actually served under him, or he was like her commanding officer or something, and whatever it was he did in the army, can't even remember, some sort of like special forces type or special secret ops type, whatever. And so he needed her help. They come together, and they're doing their investigation-y stuff, and they go to this it's a strip bar. And there's this scene in there where it's like they just have to show, they just have to have some sort of tough woman scene where she's beating the crap out of some guy for being inappropriate with a woman. And the setup for the scene that happened, okay, that's, the dude was manhandling the woman or whatever. But the way that scene was just shoehorned in to the story, it felt so forced, and I just couldn't help but like, oh, okay. I was just that was not impressive to me at all. It just didn't flow well. It's kind of like, you know how a lot of times when we talk about, you know, agenda or woke stuff or certain narratives or whatever, being forced into the story, not necessarily organically occurring within the story. And you can kind of tell it's because it's like it stands out and it's just very glaring, that sort of thing. That's how that came across. It was like they just had to write this. And I don't even know, maybe this happened in the book, honestly. I don't remember the character, but the way it was carried off in the show stood out to me as pretty disingenuous, kind of silly, it just over the top, and it the way the character, the way the actress played the scene, it was just not, it did not work for me. So that was sort of something in the con territory, but again, it was just one little scene. It wasn't anything that put this huge, you know, black mark on the whole series for me and made me not enjoy it. It was just, that was just one little thing. Okay, I think there were two other things that I wanted to mention. And this ties back around to the character played by Malcolm Goodwin. You guys, I feel like I want to watch some other stuff with him because, I don't know, maybe it was just his character in here because of how he had to be played. But one of the reasons that he became one of my favorite characters in this season is because his body language, the way he would do his head, and you know, it would and especially when he was annoyed, you know, and he was just trying to really he was when he would be sparring with Reacher's character, but it was just so like, and you could tell the attitude he was going to have based on the body language that he portrayed. And it was just like he was an open book. You could read him very well, and it made him very humorous. I mean, it wasn't like it made him a laughing stock. There were some very humorous moments, like with him and Reacher, and as they were trying to one-up each other all the time. But it made his character endearing to me, and it made him really funny, even though it wasn't like ridiculous over the top funny, but just, you know, how you get to know a character and you know their little quirks in the way they are, and you can just see an expression on their face and you just get it. That was the way his character was with me. But something I did appreciate about his character was that you don't know everything about, like you don't know everything about Reacher either, but you don't, or even Roscoe. But I like the different layers to his character, and as the show goes on, we get to know more and more about why he left where he had been before, because it was someplace up north, maybe Boston or something, and he comes down to this little podunk nothing town in Georgia, and it's like, why is this very highly educated guy from up north coming all the way down here? You know, you're just like, what? And then as the show goes on, you find out more about him, and you get to know why, and you find out more about Roscoe's character. You find out more about Reacher's character. I really like the body language of Reacher too, and I didn't write this down, but it was something that was floating around in my head. He had this unusual way of, like I mentioned in the other review that I did for the first two episodes, that he was almost Sherlockian, the way he could analyze something and figure something out about a character and be able to make all these highly, I don't know, like high-level deductions and reasoning and analyzing and all this stuff. And you could tell when he would be doing these things in his head, because he would kind of remove himself from, he would almost mentally distance himself from what was going on around him, because he was processing what was going on, or he was processing his thoughts and what he was deducing and everything. And he would sort of separate himself a bit from those around him and go and just do his own thing. And the way he even walked and carried himself, it was just like he was just so focused on what he was thinking about, and it showed in his body language. I thought that was kind of interesting, because at first I was like, what? He's different. He walks funny when he's in these, it's like when his brain gets in this gear mode of whatever it is he does, his body language took on a whole different sort of thing. It just, he looked different, or what, he didn't physically look different. He walked different. He carried himself different. And I thought that was pretty interesting. Another thing I was going to mention, probably the last thing specifically about this season, well, from the notes I took, the very end, you know, there's this showdown, as always happens in, you know, stories like this. And something that I appreciated at the end, when Reacher's going up against the main bad guy at the end, there's several bad guys, but when he's going up against the main bad guy, and also when just all the people were engaged in the fighting that was happening, because there was this, you know, it was a big fight, gunfight, whatever, physical fights and stuff that happened. The fight scenes were no nonsense. It wasn't something that was dragged out. You know how in stories, movies or TV shows, when two people have the final battle, it can be this drawn out thing, and you know, like the fight starts and then it looks like the good guy's gonna get his butt kicked, and then at the last second he does something and then he wins the fight. It wasn't, there might have been some elements of that formula woven into some of the scenes at the end, but for the most part, when they were facing against each other to have this fight or whatever, it wasn't something that was long and drawn out. It was just like that. It was like, oh wow, I expected that to last quite a bit longer than it did, but I wasn't disappointed. I just noticed it because I was like, wow, that's not typical of how we see these sorts of things. It wasn't like the final showdown was over and that's it. There were multiple characters involved, but with each character and the stuff that was going on, there were some that involved things that happened a bit longer because there was other stuff that was happening that was preventing that scene from being over quickly. But just as a whole, especially when it came down to the fight between Reacher and the main baddie at the end, it wasn't this long thing that went on for a while and, you know, whatever. So it was just something that stuck out to me enough that I made a note about it. But anyway, I really, really enjoyed this show. From what I understand, it did extremely well. It was like, I think it was Amazon Prime's, I read something about it. Like it was their first, what was it? It did something unusual or pretty significant when it came out. Maybe I'm confusing it with Bosch, but I thought it was Reacher. I'm gonna have to look it up and maybe put it up put some sort of video, some sort of text note about it. But from what I understand, it was very, very well received by the official critics and audience members alike. I think that fans of the books, like I said, I've only listened to one, so it's not like I've got a whole lot of commentary to draw on as far as the books go. But from what I can tell, fans of the books really, really dug this first season. And so that's cool. I mean, that says good things about it going forward. Hopefully they've got tons of material to draw from. So from what I understand, there were some elements from one or two other books that were woven into this, I think. But for the most part, this entire first season is based on the first book of the series, and there are many, many books in this series, so there's tons of material that they can refer to make some great stories for us to watch. And I look forward to season 2. Do not know when it will be coming out, but I just know that it has been greenlit, so hopefully in the not too distant, scare me, hopefully, sorry, hold on, forgot I had my notification sounds on. Hopefully in the not too distant future. And I guess that's it for this one. I did end up going a little bit longer than I thought. As I talked, I was remembering things. So, but yeah, I think that's it. So I'm going to wrap this up. We'll see you guys later. Bye.